In this video, we're going to go over how to summarize financial documents or just make the information more digestible with ChatGPT and other AI tools. For this video, we'll focus on doing this in SEC 10Ks and 10Qs. So I have a prompt here on Substack, which I will link to in the description below, so you don't have to type all this out yourself. But essentially what this prompt is going to do is it's going to allow us to summarize any 10K that we feed into ChatGPT. So I'm giving it a role at the top about how it's a financial analyst and that it should analyze the financial document and base its analysis report only on the document that we provide. Same thing, giving it context that we're going to provide a document. And then we have instructions that it should generate a concise financial analysis report based off the attached document. A lot of the sections here are copied over from a previous prompt I made in my last video about how to use ChatGPT to research stocks. So we'll just go over it briefly again. ChatGPT is going to provide a company overview, essentially a brief description of what the company does. Then it will go over its business model, how the company makes money, the products, projects, or services the company's working on, the potential growth opportunities they have, a relatively concise industry analysis, going over the competitors, the partnerships, potential moats, competitive advantages. It will go over the management team, which is going to be mentioned relatively briefly in one of these documents, but it'll kind of give us a glimpse into who operates the company, a financial analysis, and the risks and the upcoming catalysts. Now, for the data analysis suggestions, we're telling you to pay attention to any trends and patterns in the financial data over time, any relationships between different financial items, disclosures related to accounting policies, MD&A sections for insights into the management's perspective on the business, and additional instructions for when there's any information that might be unclear or missing, and that ChatGPT should indicate that. And the constraints are essentially prioritizing accuracy and focusing on information that investors would find valuable, and also to make sure that there's no external information being presented in the report. So if we go over to the Edgar website for the SEC, we're just going to pull up Tesla's latest 10Q, which is from April 23rd. Keep in mind, when you're on the SEC website, this is not going to print accurately. As you can see here, this is only going to save one page if I just try to save it as a PDF. But if you go into the menu here on the left-hand side at the top, you can open it in HTML. And now this will allow you to actually print out that document and save it. You can see now we have 37 pages. We can actually save that document and put it into ChatGPT. Here we are, and I've put in the Tesla 10Q for Q1, and I've pasted in the prompt that we're using. If we scroll down, we can see we have a company overview of Tesla, Texas-based technology and automotive company, primarily engaged in designing, manufacturing, and selling electric vehicles. And we have the business model. Most of the people watching very likely know what this company does, but we can see that it's generally pulling the correct information from the document. That's mainly what we're looking for. So main business model is, of course, automotive sales, and we can see the different products they have, the different EV models, full self-driving technology, growth opportunities, potential AI integrations with full self-driving, of course, and further expansion globally into different markets. The industry analysis is going to be very lackluster. We're going to go over in a separate video how to do a far more complex industry analysis of any industry you want to look at. But going down further, we can see some of the competitors. Again, this prompt is not going to be as comprehensive as something you might see from a deep research prompt, but we're kind of just getting an idea of what the company looks like. And attaching the document is going to make it a little easier for you to trust the information and assume that there's going to be less hallucinations. But we'll get into that more as well as we get into the video. You can also see some different potential partnerships that they have. You know, Tesla doesn't really have many, but they're working with different utility customers, and they have a facility in China. Now, the potential moats would be vertical integration, essentially economies of scale, the brand strength of Tesla, which has been getting diminished recently with some of the things Elon is doing, but that's neither here nor there, and also some of the software they're working on. We can see that there's not really much disclosed in terms of who's even on the management team in the document. It also mentions some ongoing litigation with Elon Musk, but yeah, really not very in depth there with the management team. And we'll create some different prompts for a lot of these different sections for these companies later in different videos. We can see in the financial analysis, the changes year over year are looking pretty grim for the company in many aspects, besides the operating cash flow. So not looking good on that front. and it gave us some different observations. Gross margins have been compressed, automotive revenues falling, net income impacted by restructuring costs and rising R&D. So not looking good. And we can see the different risks. There's going to be plenty of risks with any automotive company. And then we also have some of the upcoming catalysts that are mentioned in the document. So pretty in-depth. And like I said, of course, most of us know a lot of these things about Tesla. It's in the news all the time, and it's a very popular stock. But you could do this for any company and get a good overview of what they're working with. Now, if you want to do this for documents outside of the United States, for example, if you want to go to CDAR for Canada, if you want to go to a Canadian company, we can go to the reporting issuers list here. If it'll let me, there we go. Then we can pull up Shopify, for example, and go into their profile, search for the documents, and see that Shopify has an interim MD&A and an interim financial statements and report. So these are actually, most of the information you would find in a 10Q or a 10K is actually going to be in two separate documents in a place like Canada. So you would just put both of those documents into ChatGPT when using the prompt. Now, if you want a quick look at some financial ratios, I would actually recommend using something like QuickFS instead of trying to get it out of ChatGPT. So that's going to be really questionable, and depending on what document you're putting in, it's not going to be the best. So we've pulled up Tesla here, and it's worth noting that we can see a lot of the different valuation ratios and key stats, and we can see the trends in revenue and gross profit, operating profit, earnings per share, things of that nature. So you can get a general trend of what's going on in the numbers, even without getting that from ChatGPT itself. This is pretty straightforward and easy to see. So I like to use this website if I'm trying to look for some of those ratios and kind of see if it's something that might be cheap or not. Now, Tesla's never been cheap, but we'll digress away from that. As I mentioned in this video and the last one that I made, you're going to want to make sure that you're actually reading these financial documents yourself just to confirm everything's accurate. At least at some point, it's probably a good idea to do that. Now, when you're doing that, if you're a beginner and new to researching stocks, you might not know what a lot of the terminology in these reports actually means. This is where something like ExplainPaper is actually incredibly useful. For example, if I just go in here and highlight, what does goodwill mean? Now, the writer will show us that it'll explain as a high schooler or undergrad reading level, but we'll just go with high schooler, and we can have it immediately explain what goodwill is. And this website is totally free. You can just sign in with your email, and anything that you underline will immediately tell you what it is. So you don't have to go into a separate tab and search up what goodwill is or go on Google, anything like that. You can just immediately search it up with the document in here, and it will tell you what everything means. This is incredibly useful. This is great for beginners trying to understand some of the terminology in these documents, or even advanced investors that are looking at a new stock and they don't know what some technology might mean or some scientific term if it's a complex company. Here we can see what accounts receivable and allowance for doubtful accounts is. Explain it as a high schooler. And there we go. Accounts receivable refers to the money that a company expects to receive from its customers for goods or services provided on credit. The allowance for doubtful accounts is an estimate of the amount that may not be collected, accounting for the risk that some customers might not pay their bills. So you can do this for any term in here, and I think it's a great tool when you're actually looking at the financial documents yourself instead of having ChatGPT give you a summary. Now, if you're worried about hallucinations and you don't want to constantly check these documents yourself, you might have a more reliable option in NotebookLM. Now, that's not to say that ChatGPT is really unreliable, but, there is a higher chance for hallucinations. So the interesting thing about NotebookLM is that it only pulls information from your document. There is no possible way that it's going to pull information from anywhere else. You just have your sources on the left here. You can add more as you please, and you'll only pull information from whatever source you have selected. Right now I have that Tesla 10Q selected, and I have a shorter prompt here that we use to pull a lot of the same information. Now going back to Substack, we can see that below the previous prompt, we can see that I also included a shorter prompt for NotebookLM specifically because these prompts need to be a lot shorter. NotebookLM only allows around 250 words or less. It depends, but generally around that length. So we had to get rid of the constraints in the data analysis suggestions, but this actually allows us to use that prompt since it's shorter. So we can use that in here, and we can see that we're pulling a lot of the same information. It actually goes even more in depth than ChatGPT was itself. ChatGPT was a little more summarized. This is actually getting increasingly in depth with the information that it's pulling. So if you actually have a specific document that you're looking at, NotebookLM might actually be better than ChatGPT itself because it's providing a lot more information here. But yeah, to save some time, I'm not going to go over all the results of this again. It's generally going to be a lot of the same information. Very popular company. This is just increasingly in depth for us to go over. So I think those are some tools that are really useful for investors, whether you're a beginner or an advanced investor. Now, again, I want to stress that we definitely need to confirm the information that we're seeing before you make an investment decision. But this is a great way to pull in documents and see if you would like to research a company further. But if you'd like to learn more about using AI for stock research, then consider subscribing to this channel and check out my newsletter on Substack as well. All links will be in the description, and thanks for watching.